Where's my stupid record button?
Now, I've got a little bit of an introduction for you. Kerry Nietz, you've been writing for about 10 years. You've
Actually,
got
longer.
over longer than
Yeah.
10.
Well over 15 now. My first novel was published in 2009, I think it was, or 8, so
Okay.
quite a while now. So,
Okay.
and,
And
yeah,
I had you pegged at like 10 books. Is that right?
it's more than a dozen now. Yeah, I have
Okay.
a nonfiction book and then like a dozen novels, I think, out there. So, over a
Okay.
million words, anyway. I know that. So,
So now your books generally are sci-fi,
yes,
and yet you've got this tech background.
yeah.
So kind of help me understand creative side, very analytical number side. How do those two connect for you?
So there's the misperception, I guess. The coding generally is an art form. Yes, there are
Okay.
there's math involved and algebra involved often, but generally it's a more of a creative pursuit. And the similarities between that and writing are there's quite a few really. You're basically moving ideas around, cutting and pasting, moving one idea from another. You're forming ideas. Um, you're building a world and solving problems along the way, which obviously when you're writing, you're doing that all the time. You're trying to make a functioning thing, and you've been through edits before. That's other people trying, seeing what things don't work, and then you're trying to be very judicious in where you're making the fixes without breaking the
Right.
rest of it. Well,
Yes.
that's the same in coding. Absolutely. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, and we jumped ahead a little bit, but I wanted
yeah,
to at least note. I mean, you've got. I guess I should say the things that I've heard about. So this is the
yeah,
big one that I've heard about, and I
sure,
had seen your the little snippet on Jimmy Fallon where he
yeah,
made a joke out of it. Hilarious, by the way.
yeah.
But that was kind of a big jump for you, then, wasn't it? At that point, that to have that sort of recognition, or was there something before this one that I should be know about?
Well, before that, Star Curiously Singing was probably my most well-known story. It's part of a trilogy, the
Hmm.
Dark Trench trilogy, and it was about this character named Sandfly who had an implant in his head. So he's kind of a programmer of the future. He fixes his bosses, or actually his master. He's kind of a slave. His toys for him. So if he has a robot breakdown or a car or whatever, whatever artificial intelligent type creation, he's the guy that goes in, tears it apart, and puts it back together again.
Now,
So yeah,
I
so
have
he's
read that, A Star Curiously
yeah,
Singing,
yeah,
and you and I were talking kind of before I started the recording, but I wanna say it on the recording. That book really blew me away. Just
yeah.
I did not
Thanks.
expect where it went. It was so clear to me that the architecture for the ending was there at the beginning. I don't know where I saw this, but I thought I had seen somebody that had compared you to being, like, if you would be the baby of C.S. Lewis and Isaac Asimov or something
Yeah,
like that.
someone did say that. That's a
Okay,
quote.
alright, so
Yeah, I think
that
it's more
book.
about yeah. I don't think it's about me. It's about the book, but
Well, okay, sure,
yeah.
sure. Y
But
you don't have any British roots in you,
yeah, I
apparently.
do not.
Oh, okay. That book for sure to me really illustrated that sort of a concept,
Yeah,
taking this somebody you're very obviously very much into the world building and taking the sci-fi seriously,
yeah,
and then infusing this C.S. Lewis-esque, um, theology or theological understanding of the world,
yeah,
that worldview. It was beautiful. So,
yeah.
anyways, enough
Thank you.
enough fanboying on that. I just
Yeah, I appreciate it.
definitely
Thank
wanna
you.
recommend that book.
Yeah, thank you.
But you've got a new book out. We wanna tell everybody about
Yeah,
that a little bit?
yeah. It's called yeah, Lost Bits. It's a little robot buddy story, and maybe not as deeply theological as some of mine, but definitely more accessible, I think, to some people too.
Give us a little bit of the pitch for Lost Bits, because I know what it is, but for the sake of those watching.
So it's about this robot that kind of wakes up in the future inside in a garbage dump, and the last thing he remembers is his family and the kid that he took care of, and so he kind of goes on this journey to find his family. I don't know what to compare it to, but it definitely is sort of this robot buddy adventure sort of
Yeah,
thing. So
yeah.
yeah,
So let's jump into a couple questions that I wrote up. As
sure,
somebody who writes, I also think about some of these things, and these are going to be more broad on just the topic of writing.
Okay.
Give us a little bit of sense for what inspires you. You've touched already a little bit on your career past. Sounds
Yeah.
like that plays into it, but what else?
Um, I just always wanted to write, even since I was a kid. I was a big reader. I was one of those that I don't know if you remember like the Scholastic Book Club, but
Mhm.
when I was a kid, they did these little catalogs they give you at school that had all the books you could pick out, and they'd order for you, and I'd have like 20 circled every time, and my parents were crazy enough to buy them for me, and I just loved reading. So always wanted, like I said, always wanted to write. It was just more waiting for the opportunity and the inspiration to do it. So
Mm.
um, yeah, I just like telling stories. People that know me know that I'm a storyteller at heart. So
Is there particular stories that have kind of inspired you? Things that you said, okay, that makes me want to write.
hmm. um, yeah, that's a good question because I've read so many. Like I grew up reading like Bradbury and Asimov
Mm.
and Lewis,
Yeah.
and Tolkien and just kind of all the great speculative thinkers, and
Yeah.
yeah, and just the world building. I love world building, like kind of taking my mind in a place it's never been before, and hopefully taking the readers
Mm.
along too.
You've named a couple that I really enjoyed. I mean, Ray Bradbury for me was something I read maybe a little bit younger than I was, should have been reading it. I'm not
Okay.
sure, but in my early teens, I kind of got into
Yeah.
Bradbury,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think what I would describe as sort of a good entry point for him. I think everyone knows him for Fahrenheit 451,
Sure.
but the
Martian
one that
Chronicles,
seems say
maybe.
again.
Martian Chronicles, maybe. That's another
Yeah,
one
I
of
I actually think the one that I my earliest memory is of Something Wicked This Way
Wicked This Way
Comes,
Come. Yeah. Yeah.
in part because it's a little more, it leans a little more horror. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
really horror, but it leans a little more in the fright factor.
Yeah.
But even with Bradbury doing, anything he writes, it always turns out to be somewhat poetry.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter what genre it is, it's gonna be a little
Yes.
bit poetic.
That's true. It's true. You definitely can.
And that one, I just have haunting memories of some of the, scenes in it.
Okay.
I really don't remember it clearly now, but I mean, I still remember, like, the girl who was an old woman, she goes into
Yeah.
the House of Mirrors, I think it is, and when she comes out, she's like a little child, a little girl now, and it's
Right.
just
Right.
stuff that when you're a kid, you're like, "Okay, that's not it's
No,
not
that's
outright gory, it's just
yeah.
sorta
It's
creepy."
weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Bradbury's been a favorite of mine,
Yeah.
and he's somebody I've noticed even now, I can circle back and reread some of his stuff
Mhm.
and enjoy it again, or maybe even enjoy it in a different way now that I'm a little older, in
Sure.
part because he's so good at his craft of writing.
Yeah.
So you can kind of
Yeah.
enjoy him on multiple levels.
Sure. Yeah. Like and stories like Fahrenheit 451, they're always um, they kind of meet the times, and especially I think
Yeah.
no time more than now. I actually read it to my teenage son. Like we read it together, and it's like wow, this he was ahead of his time on so much of this. Just kind of immersion
Yeah.
in entertainment. And you think of the
Oh, yeah,
life
like the wall
life that
screens
yeah
and
yeah
just the
it's all about
addiction.
entertainment and
Yep.
um, recreational drugs, and just kind of all the things that you kind of see today, and yeah, I was just way ahead of his time. So
So, yeah, that's definitely a standout. What was the other one you mentioned? You mentioned Lewis and Tolkien, but, did you say Asimov?
Asimov, yeah, I read a lot of his books, especially
Anything in Asimov that stood out to you or anything that you kind of go back to? Because 'Cause I've got a
probably
couple of
the
his too.
robot novels, like I don't know if you're the ones that Elijah Bailey, they're really more mysteries. Elijah
Yeah.
Bailey and R. Daniel, they
I've got those the trilogy of those.
yeah, actually,
First one's The Caves of Steel, I wanna
that's
say.
correct. That's correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and I think actually there were four of them because I think the last one was called Robots and Empire, and he kind of tied
Ooh,
the tied it into Empire. So actually quite well.
okay.
Yeah,
I
and
missed that
then
one, so I did not know he
yeah,
did that.
yeah. So and then I think I went on to read the foundation stories and whatnot. I think they're I think only like the Empire ones I haven't read yet, like that trilogy where they're kind of branching out into space. I haven't read yet.
Now,
I have to get around to those.
Empire, are we talking about is that's Foundation, right? The Foundation trilogy?
Well, okay,
Or am I mixing them up?
so Foundation is after the Empire had already been formed, but there actually is a series of books that take place in between Robots and Foundation, where the Empire, like man, is moving out into space and the Empire is forming. So this whole idea
Okay.
in between. So kind of like a
Okay, gotcha.
yeah,
So for me, Asimov. No, I did read the those first three books in the Lige Bailey. I can't remember the robot's name. What was the robot's name?
our Daniel,
Our
all of
Daniel.
all.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
I got those three books somewhere in a set, the
yeah,
first three. So I'd read those, but more I was more exposed to his short fiction, short stories.
sure.
Um,
Okay.
um, there was couple anthologies of robot stories,
Okay.
and the,
Yes, I
the
Robot being one. Yep.
yes, yes. Um, which oh boy, let's not go into movie spin-offs of
Yeah,
these books. But uh, anyways, sticking
yeah,
with the book,
right.
they're so much fun because of his very calculated logic. Even
Yeah.
and I'm
Sets the
recalling now
rules
the
and
three
stays,
laws
yes,
of robotics and
right.
how he would be able to set up a situation where you would think at the very outset, well, obviously the laws are not functioning, and so he's almost like a Agatha Christie of robots, because
Right.
it's a mystery to figure out on these short stories how could the robot be malfunctioning in this way when you know these laws. So he was very creative at coming up with those little mental puzzles.
Hmm.
A
Yeah.
little weak on characters, I would say. He's pretty flat
Yeah.
when it came to his characters. A lot of
Sure.
times you don't get any like human drama interaction. He's more of a mental puzzle guy. Whereas
Yeah.
Bradbury's more like small town nostalgia and
Yes.
poetry and remembering what things were like and yearning for better
Yeah.
times. They just have very
Very
different
character
flavors.
driven. Yeah, that's true.
Well, what about and I don't want to delve too deeply in any way that's uncomfortable, but what about things that are discouraging? Things that you run into as you're trying to do your own writing and you just kind of go, "Okay, this I'm done."
Hmm. I I think probably the big discouragement for most writers who've been doing it a while is you have very little feedback from readers, other than an occasional review,
Mhm.
and so the only other thing you can focus on aside from reviews, which that's a pit of worms in itself, focusing on the
Right.
reviews because it's
Yes.
very easy to focus to kind of overlook the good ones and focus on that one that didn't. Now that's the guy that he figured me out. I'm terrible, whatever,
Yes.
and not and kind of ignore all the good that people have said. So that's that problem. But then so the only other thing you can focus on is sales, and sales is just so hard. Uh, it's hard to orchestrate, and they kind of often come on their own at their own will,
Mm, right.
and even and in the marketing, the whole marketing thing, where you'll run into a million different marketing plans that worked for somebody, like it was the most successful thing
Yeah.
ever, and
Yeah.
but not for you. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
uh,
I know for me, like, sometimes it's easy to kind of fall into a pit of researching those marketing plans.
yeah,
Think, okay, you say the link that'll come up somewhere and say, this marketing plan's promised to sell, blah, blah, blah. And you
yeah,
click on it and there might be some good stuff even in it. It's not
yeah.
always just clickbait.
No,
But
true,
you're right.
true,
It's not like
true.
there's no magic bullet in the sense that this one thing, if you do it, you're absolutely going to strike gold.
Yeah,
It just
no,
doesn't work like that.
no, it doesn't. So it
Yeah.
really, I guess the only thing that helps is just to keep producing, and the more books you have out there, the more likely people are to discover one of them and maybe like the rest of them,
Yeah.
kind of get your name out as much as you can and be involved in the communities and writing communities and with the readers and hope for the best. Occasionally, yes, you may get that 10 seconds of exposure on Tonight Show, but it doesn't usually happen. So
Yeah.
um,
Have you found when it comes to you mentioned connecting with your audience a
yeah.
minute ago on have you found that to be more effective in person versus online, or is it more about the forum? I mean, I've kind of wondered about that because so much of my interaction is online.
Yeah.
I just have not had a lot of face to face with people in my circles.
Yeah, most of my interactions start online, but then, like one of the groups I'm very involved in is Realm Makers. I don't know if you're familiar
Yes,
with that.
I am familiar with Realm
It's
Makers.
a writers conference, but they also have like a traveling bookstore, and they have a brick and mortar store now as well.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's just cool in actually in King of Prussia malls, which is like the second biggest mall in America. So
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of cool. But most of those people I met initially online, and then I went to the first writers conference, which was probably, I don't know, there's probably under 100 people there, maybe 80, and then now today there's near 400 people go,
Now,
and
when was that first one? Like, how long ago are we talking?
the first one was 10 years ago. I think this will be the 10th year.
Okay.
So
So they've got
so in
quite a bit
10
of
years,
yeah, quite a bit of
yeah.
time under their belt.
Yeah, and they've made some great strides in just kind of getting the books out there, because the function that the bookstore plays is that they take Realm award winning books out on the road with them, in these bookstores. So,
Okay.
and they go to homeschool conventions and Comic Cons or Ren fairs or whatever, and they're kind of people who would might be interested in the
Yeah.
kind of books we write,
Mhm.
and exposing them to books that they may not otherwise see.
Well,
So
and now you're saying that Realm Makers is attending those different conferences.
they are, yeah,
So
they have.
if you win a position on Realm Makers, I know they have like a competition each year, right, for
They
books
do.
that are
Mhm.
nominated, and then people vote. So if you
Yes,
win a position on that, you're kind of winning yourself almost like a mini book tour that you don't have to go on,
right,
where
right,
it's going to be exposed to more
and
people.
you're welcome to go on
Okay.
too as well. Like I've met
Right.
them in like, well, this year I went. They had a event in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and I drove down and spent the weekend with them and signed books and met readers, and but yeah, so yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool thing, and I think it's on the right track, as far as getting exposing good writers and their books to readers that might appreciate them. So
Okay.
we'll
So
see.
it's not, so that's kind of playing a double role in the sense of connecting you with other writers, but
Yeah,
also they're really showing they're really benefiting the writers by helping get them
yep.
exposure.
And the bookstore kind of feeds back into the conference for them as well, because often what you'll
Mm.
encounter at these homeschooling conventions are someone in the family wants to be a writer,
Yes.
and and you can say, hey, we have this Christian based writers conference. Come join us. You'll be with a couple hundred of your best friends, some of which you've just met, and you talk Star Wars and Lord of the Rings or whatever, and have a good time. And so like I said, it's kind of a circle where it grows the base, which is good.
What are some things
Yeah,
that you found you're like, okay, this was worth either the time investment or money investment
yeah,
to market?
probably the one that doesn't cost as much, and use a lot of time money as well, is building your newsletter list,
Mm,
building an email list, and it's safeguarded from Amazon shutting down or Facebook shutting down or whatever too, because you're building this list that you could
right.
potentially sell books to and build relationship with too, which is kind of cool. You don't get that everywhere. So um you know and I've experimented in the past with like kind of a book funnel system where you'll run ads on, say, Facebook or wherever, and give away a free book and for people signing up on the list, and I've found that fairly effective way to build my email list, aside from
Okay.
other, you know um often sometimes authors will get together and have like a email building event, where they're giving away a Kindle or giving away a bunch of free books, and those are good too. Those are good ways to get 100 at a time, or maybe even 1,000 at a time. So yeah,
Gotcha.
well, I think that's probably the most effective. Um, you know, Otherwise, it's, yeah, like I said, you can't. It's often hard to predict. Like I went to a homeschooling convention last year, and because the event was, because of COVID, it was like a later time of the year. so it wasn't as much foot traffic there, and
Right.
I didn't sell I didn't sell as much. Like it was like mid-August, Well, by then most parents have all the curriculum they want for the year, so they're just not going to attend. And
Yeah, at
um,
that point, they might have spent the budget they had assigned to use for
right,
that school year. Yeah.
right. So it was just late. Usually they're in April, May, range, June, and so yeah, it was just kind of a miserable weekend for me. However, that that very same weekend, someone happened to share the cover for Amish Vampires in Space on a book group on Facebook that had 200,000 people, and it just ballooned again with tons of sales, and it's like kind of like God saying, "Well, see, you're discouraged over here, but look what I can do in a few seconds," So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things, but you can't predict it. You just kind of have to pray for it and keep doing the work and hope that it happens.
And I would say that book cover is fantastic.
And if you look close at the guy on the floor in the back is actually the cover artist. That's can't see it. You can see his face, but he put himself in there as the dead guy. So
And who is it that does your covers?
Kirk DuPont's is his name. Dog Eared Design is his company name, but he just loves to do like he doesn't get to do science fiction as often as he might like, and so he when he gets a chance to do one of my covers, he's usually all in. And he's unique in a way too that he'll usually read the book before he comes up with the cover, so he knows
Oh,
he has a good idea
okay.
what it's about. He's
I
cool.
had looked at his website after your most recent book cover, and you linked to him in your newsletter, and
Yeah,
watched some of his process videos. It was
yeah,
fascinating. I mean,
yeah,
that's something that's way outside of my circle of understanding. So to see how he did it, it was very
yeah,
illuminating.
yeah, yeah. The girl you see on the cover of Amish Vampires in Space was actually a barista at the coffee place he used to get his coffee in the morning. Now I don't know how that conversation happened.
Yeah, like
Like how would you like to model? But yeah,
yeah, how would you like to model as an Amish girl
right,
with blood?
yeah, right, right. But it turned out
Assuming they had an established relationship, I'm sure it wasn't weird at all, but
yeah,
yeah, that is
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Boy, if I was that girl, that'd be fantastic. It'd be like, I don't want that book cover, like,
Right,
framed, "Hey,
right,
I'm on a book
right,
cover. That's really
right. Well,
cool."
she got on the Tonight Show,
And yeah, she got on
so
the Tonight Show too. That's awesome. Okay, so how about writer's block? Have you ever struggled with it? How do you overcome it?
okay. I haven't really struggled with it. One of the ways I try to prevent it is really part of my habit. I try to write every day, in the afternoon. That's kind of my time. And
Okay, yeah.
um, when I finish for the day, I try to end kind of in the middle of a scene. So I haven't finished the scene, and makes it very easy to get back into it the next day. So you
Oh,
read
okay.
through what you wrote, and
Right.
you're kind of halfway. Oh, okay, and then I'm going to finish this scene, and then you go into the next scene and leave that as the halfway mark. So you're
Hmm.
kind of always moving ahead. I think the only time I've ever like questioned it was like in the second book of the Dark Trance trilogy. I had it halfway done, and then had to break to do the edits for Star Curiously Singing, and
Oh.
I was like, when I got back to it, I was like, oh, I'll read it and see where I was, and thinking that what I was going to read was going to be not so good. Like because I'm
Yeah.
always kind of undervaluing my work. But
Yep.
what the opposite happened is that I actually got to the end of it and was like, oh, that was so good, and I don't know how to do this again. I don't know. I'm not sure if I can do this again. But then it became the faith walk part of it. It's like, okay, I'm just going to write a little bit, and kind of walk through it, and eventually you just get back in the habit, and starts to
Mm,
happen, and you finish the
yeah.
book. So
So, are you like I don't know if you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson, writes a lot of like fantasy
yeah,
novels. Um, he'll talk about this kind of two types of writers. Say there's the pantser, basically
yeah,
somebody who just has like a real basic concept of a story, and they instantly just sit down at their keyboard and start typing. Right?
right,
They're just gonna go by the seat of their pants. And
yep,
then you have a plotter, and they're gonna sit down. They've got the initial idea, and then they're going to get 3,000 note cards and begin to write
yeah,
every little beat of the story out, and they're not going to touch the keyboard until they've done everything
Right.
outlined. Where
Yeah.
do you fall on that spectrum? Because I
I'm
know, at least for me, like I don't really fall. I fall more one way than the other, but I wouldn't say I. I don't think you can divide people and say you're absolutely this or absolutely that. You're probably more somewhere on the spectrum.
yeah, I'm not an outliner at all. I just have a general idea of kind of where it's going, and um, like Bradbury said when he was writing Fahrenheit 451, he followed the main character and wrote down everything he saw, and that's kind
I
of what I do.
See, for
So
me, that's like, how
so
can you do that? That seems so
yeah,
hard for me to do it. I'm a little closer to the plotting, but yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I can appreciate
I
it.
mean that's how Stephen King writes too. He like all the books. Look how many books he's written.
Yeah.
It's all pantsing. So
That's interesting
it
you say that because I remember him saying, and I don't remember the main character's name, but the main character in Misery, I just remember
yeah
an interview where he said that he was pretty sure that character would be dead by the end of the book, and then he was surprised that the character survived.
yeah
Um,
yeah. It's
so I think
interesting.
that's referencing what you're talking about as far as being a
Yeah.
pantser.
Yes, I've definitely had that occasion. Like in Freeheads, which is like the third book in Dark Trench, I wasn't precisely sure who the villain of the whole series was until I got to the
Yeah.
end and Sandfly, the main character, walked into the room with him. And then I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, makes perfect sense. But I had no plan for that at all. But then at that moment, it made perfect sense. So I don't
My
know.
hat is off to you. I could not
Yeah,
do
I
that.
don't know. I mean, that's how it works. I can't imagine it doing another way, but I know people who plot can't imagine doing it the way I do it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm close to you when it comes to writing individual scenes, but when it comes to sort of outlining a story, I need some sort of outline, or that it just devolves into garbage too fast.
yeah,
So I have to have some sense of where I'm going. But I have
yeah,
noticed, even on this recent novel I've worked on, that I've really already done a draft, and now it's like, wait a minute, some of these details I don't have them as worked out as I thought I had them worked out. I
yeah,
kinda had to go back now and say, "No, that wasn't as clear as I thought it was when I outlined it. It
hmm,
really needs more thought."
yeah.
Do you tend
And
to do you
sometimes that's true, and sometimes it isn't true too. You have to leave a little bit of room for the reader's imagination. But what they can perceive, I mean, especially if it's not something that is integral for a later book. Might be better if you were flexible. Might be better if you
Mhm.
were.
So how do you decide, like, where you kinda leave things a little more vague and where you're
Yeah.
like, "No, I need more definition here. I can't leave that vague."
I guess I tend to leave those things up to. I mean, if I catch them when I'm reading after that first draft, I'm working on a second draft. I catch them. It's like, yeah, I definitely gotta clear that up. But otherwise, I leave it to the editor, and I have a trusted reader or two that I let read my stuff before it goes to
Mm,
anybody else. And
'kay.
if they don't say anything, then yeah, must be okay.
There was an interview I listened to recently with one of the writers for the video game Portal 2. I know you're a gamer,
Yeah,
but I don't know if you're a Valve
I'm
gamer.
familiar with it. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
okay, so and the interviewer asked this writer, basically
yeah,
said, "So how many years after Portal 1 does Portal 2 take place?" And the writer
yeah,
said, "I don't know."
yeah,
We He said, "We're really careful not to write anything we don't need when it comes to those sorts of details, because
right.
we don't wanna write ourselves into a corner,
Yes,
and
that's
then,
good thinking.
we go make Portal 3 10 years down the road, and you
Yeah,
wanna do something with the story that now you can't because you defined something that you didn't need to define.
yeah,
So you kinda write
yep,
yourself into a corner in that way." I was like, "Oh,
yep,
that's
yep.
brilliant." Yeah.
That's good thinking. Yep.
And we've talked a little bit about some of the books and stories and whatnot that you've read in the past and I've read in the past, but, is there, like, one story, whether it be, like, a movie or a book or a comic or stage play, I don't care, anything, but one that you've said, "Man, I wish I had written that."
Hmm. I don't know. Maybe Star Wars. I saw
That's a fair answer, I'd say.
yeah. Like
Well,
the.
but
I
which
mean,
Star Wars, Carrie? Which Star Wars?
well. So I saw the original in the theater when I was a kid. And if someone already was um, liked science fiction type things, or that was a mind blower.
Yeah.
And um, and so much world building, like it was revolutionary in that respect. And um, so yeah, I mean something, something like that, something epic, like a Dune or something there where it's
Mhm.
really big worlds and big ideas.
We're not talking about, like, the prequel Star Wars, we're talking about
Yeah,
Star Wars, the
yeah, the
original
original.
Star Wars,
Yeah, 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 for
before it
sure.
was Star Wars: A New Hope, when it was
Yeah,
just Star
right.
Wars.
It was just Star Wars, Episode 4. Right.
You know, I did a video a while ago about, going to a garage sale and, I found, uh, an old, box set of the Foundation trilogy, and I found an
Uh-huh.
old box set of the VHSs of Star Wars. And you said,
Wow.
your memory of going to Star Wars was as a kid in the theater. My
Right.
memory of Star Wars is VHS on a 13-inch tube TV.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's kind of funny because, uh it's not even, it's not wide, now it'd be like, "Oh, we have to have wide format," you can't have that,
Yeah.
you can't have
Yeah.
it panned and scanned and all that
Yeah.
garbage.
Pan scan.
Um,
Yeah.
but as a kid, that was my exposure to that world, and so to me,
Yeah.
that is original Star Wars is a little tiny tube TV,
Yeah. Cool.
cropped. The nostalgia over that, it's not even necessarily you saw it in the best format or anything, it's
No.
just, this is
No.
where I originally saw it, and it sparked your imagination.
It's a story. It's the story, and there's just big themes. Good and evil. So
Yeah.
farm boy making it big. Lots of cool things. So yeah.
So, here's another one. This question's a variation on the last one. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit more, I think I'm a little more cynical than you are. You seem a little nicer of a person. But
Okay.
is there
Yeah. Thanks.
one story or movie or book that you read and you go, "Oh, I wish I could have fixed that." Like they
Huh.
just missed, and I know how they could have done better. I just wish I could have done one more edit on that and fix it.
You know, the the Phantom Menace. I remember when I after seeing that and thinking, man, there's so many things that they could have done. Like they could have done better. At least I think. Now I know
Mhm.
George was kind of aiming for a younger demographic. I think with that series too.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
and that it's gotten a lot of fans. And actually, rewatching it again later, I there were things I liked more about it than I did back then. But I remember thinking, man, they should have like those the main villains. They should not have been bumbling, whatever. They should have looked scary. They should
Menacing.
have,
Yeah.
they should have, and it should have. This should have happened on the Spice Mines of Kessel. He should have been a slave there. Like this boy that they rescued shouldn't have been working for this flying, blue guy. And so things like that. Like I think I would have definitely made it a little darker, just so that his coming out of that seemed more dramatic. But
Yeah. The prequels came out before the Lord of the Rings trilogy, didn't it? Do I have my
yeah, they were like
timeline right?
late. Yes, I think they're like
I think it
late
was, like,
'90s.
early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Or was it
late '90s.
99?
Yeah, yeah, late '90s, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, so it had been before Lord of the Rings.
yeah,
In some ways I've thought, um and I have Lord of the Rings, I have great memories of, and
sure.
plenty of criticisms there as far as how it doesn't match the book in some ways, but, um, at least Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think Jackson really nailed the
Yes,
heart of that sort of epic story.
yes, I think so too.
So I have
Yeah,
great memories of like 3 Christmases in a row coming home from college with my wife and
right.
going to see it with my parents.
Yeah,
But I had wondered at some point, you've talked about Star Wars, going to the theater, big deal, just
right.
changes cinema in some ways at that
Yes,
point. It seemed to me like Lord of the Rings kinda did that again, at
it
least
did.
in regard of
Yeah,
um, the the I don't wanna the term coming to mind is darkness. You mentioned the Phantom Menace not being quite as dark as we would have
yeah,
liked it to,
yeah,
but it's maybe more of a seriousness? I don't know, but Lord of the
yeah,
Rings was darker in some ways,
yeah.
not unnecessarily, but just a little more
No,
gritty and serious,
the
and
story
I
was
think
darker.
yeah,
It's not the
yeah,
Hobbit. Yeah, it's darker.
yeah,
So
but you can almost see where the Lord of the Rings kind of, makes that now more of a thing
yeah,
cinematically. Where now films kind of, "Oh, yeah, something a little darker, a little grittier is
yeah,
okay." This is kind of a silly example, but, I noticed when I watched it, the thing that struck me was that the faces of the characters were dirty.
yes.
That they took
That's
the
yeah,
time to smear,
right.
like, dirt and mud on Frodo's face and
Yeah,
Sam, and you just the fact that they did that when in Hollywood generally things are so shiny and
Yeah.
the lighting's perfect and people's faces have got makeup on them, and it
Yeah.
it it made it that sort of little attention to detail, those types of things really made it feel more earthy in a way that most films never accomplish or don't even try to.
Yeah. That's funny you say that. There's a I saw Harrison Ford where he was being interviewed, and he talked about in the original Star Wars how him and Mark Hamill were talking about. Mark Hamill was very much after they got out of the garbage compactor. It's like we should be all dirty and we should be, you know. And Harrison
Yeah.
Ford's like, boy, if people are worrying how much dirt is on our face at this point, we failed. Which I thought was good observation. But you're right. You're right. Lord of the Rings definitely it felt lived in.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah,
The Hobbit, not so much.
yeah, not as much. No,
No.
no. Well, I do have some favorite scenes in that as well. Like I really like when like I'm going on an adventure. Like that whole scene right there. Just him realizing it's like this is what I'm meant to do. And I think like every writer should kind of should sort of feel that way when they're diving into
Mhm.
the writing. It's like I'm going on an adventure. I get this opportunity to go someplace that's never been seen before. You
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
And
that makes
as
sense.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, no, it does. And I mean, I would connect it almost theologically in the sense of,
absolutely.
we serve a God that
Right.
speaks existence into existence, our
Yes.
existence,
Yeah.
and is obviously phenomenally creative. Well, for instance, I'm less of a gamer now because I'm a father and trying to be
Yeah.
more productive in my life. But in the
Right.
past, playing video games, video games always have sort of a level of detail. And if you go any further, you glitched out of the map, right?
You're
Or
right.
if you
Yeah.
get too close to the ground, you can see the
Sure.
grass is one dimensional. There's
Sure.
always something like that where you see the edge of the
Yeah.
canvas.
Okay.
And yet, in the world we live in, I can lay down in my backyard and
Right.
find a
See
whole
the
world
detail.
out there crawling.
Right.
I
Bugs
can
and
go out to
right.
space and find planets that make our planet look like the head of a pin. The scale and the
Yes.
detail
Yeah.
is what makes
Yeah.
reality
That's
so
cool.
unbelievable.
Right.
The final thing I wanted to do with you, and for people watching this, I did warn him I was going to do this, but
Right.
in
Okay.
your Twitter bio, and here's my evidence now. I got to find the slide here. Creator of curious science fiction, refugee of the software industry, husband, father, technophile, and you say you're a movie buff.
Yeah.
So I want you to prove that to me, Carrie. Now, I've
Okay.
considered myself to be a movie buff as well.
Okay.
So what I did, and I actually like Googled this. I was like, okay, can you how do you how do you prove you're a movie buff? And I
Yeah.
found like this little quiz.
Okay.
And the quiz basically was images, still images from films,
Hmm.
and you were supposed to guess which movie it was from.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
what I've done is I grabbed, I think it's 5 or 6 films that I really liked, and
Okay.
pretty broad as far as what they're from.
Okay.
And now, if you get stuck on one, there's 2 images per film. So if you don't know from the first image, I
Okay.
have a second image for each one
Okay.
that you can basically say, okay, I want to see the second one, and I'll
All
give you
right.
a second chance to figure it out. So
All
I'm
right.
calling it movie buff or full of fluff because this is a
Okay.
PG show, right?
Interesting. All
So
right.
I want
Cool.
to know now. Do you really, really know your movies? Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Now,
Cool.
when you say movie buff, you're not saying like Marvel movie buff, right? Because some people say they're
No,
movie buffs and
I
all
mean,
they've ever seen is
I
Marvel.
definitely lean more into the speculative stuff, but I've been watching movies for a while, so yeah,
Okay. Well, there's
go
some
with this.
speculative stuff in here. So I
Okay.
will expect you to get those. Okay. So here's the first one.
The flying pig.
And, for people that are watching this after I put it together online, this is your chance now to beat
High
Carrie
rolling. I gotta
in
recognize
guessing.
the actor. That's a good one. Okay, what is the second picture?
Okay, second picture.
Oh, okay, Children of Men.
There we go. You got it.
Okay,
Very good. Children of Men. That is that is a great speculative film. So
it
anybody who's
is.
watching this, you haven't seen it,
Yeah,
you've got to see it. It's
yeah,
amazing. It's a film that I definitely definitely an adult film. There's some language warnings there. There's
yeah,
some non-sexual nudity in it, but it's a film that is similar, I would say, maybe even to Fahrenheit 451, in the sense that it's a
yeah.
commentary. Um, and
It's
fun
so
fact,
good.
it's based on a novel. by P.D. James, who was a Christian novelist, a lady. She's passed away now. The
Hmm.
book is very good too, but it's different. So this is an instance where the movie is good, the book is good, they're just different.
Okay. Huh. Didn't know that.
Okay,
Okay.
next one.
Yeah.
Here we go. Not
Hmm.
speculative. There's my hint.
Yeah. Yeah. I would guess not. Trying to recognize the characters there, though. All right. Give me the second one. I got this. Oh, Hoosiers.
Yeah.
That
Hoosiers.
was going to be my guess. It's just that I couldn't like the characters. Those are kind of
Yeah. Well, I was like, okay, I got to be a little tricky on this. If I
yeah,
show Gene Hackman right away, it's going to be so obvious with
yeah.
those boys.
Well, their uniforms, yeah. Okay.
Yes. This is another VHS memory for me.
Yeah, I love that
Saturdays,
movie.
my mom takes my sister and goes to town, which is like an hour away, and dad's like,
Yeah,
"Hey, we're gonna eat lunch and watch Hoosiers on
yeah.
VHS."
Great movie.
Loved
Yeah,
Hoosiers.
yeah.
Still
It
love
gives you
Hoosiers.
definitely gives you the feel of the Midwest too. That's one thing it felt like they got right.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Midwest, and it just feels right. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
cool.
I grew up I was living in Nebraska at the time, so yeah, it
Okay.
connected with me too as a kind of a Midwestern feel.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so yes, Hoosiers, for those of you that don't know and haven't seen it, shame on you. Go watch it. It's amazing.
Right.
It's the
Great. Yeah.
only
Great
sports
movie.
film you ever need to see. That's not Carrie saying that, that's
That's
me.
right. That's right. That's right.
All right, here we go.
Hmm. This looks familiar too. What is this? Huh. 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 Huh.
This one's a
Yeah.
little more obscure.
Yeah. It's obscure. Okay. What's the second picture? Wow. I'm still stumped. I don't know if I've seen this movie. Hmm.
For a guy who likes
A man
world
in
building and speculative,
man in a chair. You think that Doctor Xavier, but that's not it. It's not Doctor
yeah.
Professor X. It's not Professor X. Who is that? Okay. What is it? What is this?
Okay. Brazil.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think I've seen this all the way through. In fact, I
So,
think, man, what year did this movie come out? We're talking,
oh, I want to say 82, but I
yeah,
could
we're
be
talking early
wrong.
'80s. Yeah,
And it's okay. So in one sense, you can have a little bit of a pass on this one too, because it's technically British, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
it's Terry Gilliam, who was one of the members of the Monty Python
yes.
troupe. He directed it. I'm pretty sure wrote it as well. But there's a two versions of it. There's like the Hollywood version where they changed the ending a little bit to make it a little more palatable for American
Okay.
audiences at the time. And then
Huh.
there's like the original Terry Gilliam version. Do not watch the American version.
Okay.
Just
All
don't.
right. Keep
It's
that in mind.
pointless. Why would you read a book where it's like somebody
Right.
who wasn't the author went in and said, "Well, I can make the ending better."
Yeah.
So the
Like
original
Blade
Brazil,
Runner. Something.
love
Yeah.
it. Okay, so I stumped you on that one.
All right.
Let's go to the next one.
Hmm. Boy, that looks
Okay, if nothing else, I'm at least building your list of movies to see. And if you're watching this, you need to go see these movies too.
yeah. I think have I not seen this one?
Okay, let me give you the second one on
Who's
this
there?
one.
Is this the Apostle? No.
No, but similar in
Robert
tone.
Duvall. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
What would this? Hmm. Is this a
And it predates
Western?
The Apostle.
It does. What is this? Yes, it does because he looks younger. Oh, what is this? All right, what is it? You got me. Tender Mercy. I have not seen that one.
Another film I can't recommend enough.
Okay. And drama, I assume.
Yeah, it's a soft touch, the movie.
Okay.
It's not you can't go into it looking for a Jason Bourne film. I mean, you've got to be willing to just settle down.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to say it's late 70s is when it came out.
Okay.
But if you're willing to sort of move at its pace, it's just a beautiful, touching drama. Very, very redemptive story too.
Okay.
Okay, so one more or two
All
more. I
right.
think I've got two more.
Okay. Hmm. Wow. That looks familiar.
I'm warning you, when I go to the second image, you're going to know what this is.
Hmm. It's very dark, crystally or something. Hmm.
Yeah. It's
It's
not Dark Crystal, but
not
yes,
from
it
that.
does
Like you're from that.
has some
Yeah.
vibes. Yeah, similar vibes for
Different
sure.
vibes, but it's not. Hmm. All right, give it to me. What's the second one?
Here's the second one.
Oh, okay. Edward Scissorhands. Interesting.
Edward Scissorhands it is,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Another odd film. Okay, I
Yes.
think I do have one more, Carrie. Here we
All
go.
right. Here. Okay. Hmm.
I'm taking you
Black and white.
overseas
Okay.
on this one.
I'm gonna say this is over. This looks like a foreign film to me. Hmm. Hmm. Is that guy holding a ninja sword? Is that what's going on there, or
Yes.
a samurai
Yep, he's got a
samurai
samurai
sword?
sword, yep.
Yeah. Huh.
Let me give you the second one too.
All right.
So this is another fantastic film if you haven't seen it.
Okay. What
Um,
is it?
totally worth seeing. Yojimbo.
Okay.
Um, and I'm drawing a blank on names again. The director of this film, he also directed another one called what was it called? Like The Hidden Castle or The Hidden Fortress, something like that.
Okay.
And what's interesting for Star Wars fans is this director was an inspiration to George Lucas.
Okay.
The film, I want to say it's The Hidden Fortress. So the film The Hidden Fortress, there's two characters in it that apparently were inspiration for C3PO and R2D2.
Okay.
And he pretty much kind of lifted. There's a duo characters that are a little bit comedic in that story, and
Okay. All
Lucas
right.
kind of adapted them. Wanted to make sure at least plugged your website. My website is
Yep.
there as well as Carrie's. Where else
Yep.
would they be looking for you online, Carrie?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and MeWe as well, and
Okay,
Twitter, back on Twitter. So
back on
uh,
Twitter.
back on Twitter. Yep.
You and me both.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you and I jumped back on about the same time. It's like, well, maybe
Yeah.
it's time
Okay.
to
Yeah.
try
I
it
took a pause there
again.
for a while.
For people that are watching, the other thing I would make sure I mention is if you want to get a taste for Carrie's work, he gives away this first book in his trilogy on his website. So jump to
Yep.
his website
Yep.
and you can download this first book for Kindle. Thank you, Carrie, so much for spending time
Yeah.
with me. We'll talk to you later,
Have a
sir.
good day. Okay. See you. Yep.
Thank you for watching, everybody.